Wednesday, June 16th, 2021. It is 6:33. Roll call vote, please. Clark Brewer.
Clark Brewer.
Tom Callahan. Here. Paul Raven.
Paul Ray, yeah.
Eric Pollard. Amy Glassmeyer here. Welcome everyone to the first public meeting.
Mr. Chairman, do we have Paul Caleri on
No,
Zoom?
he is not going to be with us
Okay.
until September.
Um,
He's on vacation.
he will be able to if we go back to remote, which is starting again tomorrow. So I did email him letting him know
Okay.
if that's okay. Sorry to interrupt.
That's fine, that's fine. He contacted me about not being able
Right.
to, it wasn't going to be.
Right.
So I
So we'll just play it.
yesterday after my,
Right. You emailed me this morning. I think with all this confusion, we'll figure it out.
So Jen, would you mind explaining, as we, Eric Pollard.
I thought it
Say
did.
hi.
Yes.
Okay, thank you. Could you explain to the public and both domains
Certainly.
how they can participate in the discussion?
Absolutely. Thank you, Madam Chair. So with the issues with the State House of not signing, we've gone remote, we've gone live today, but also I have our Zoom link running so they can listen. We did this last night for the zoning board. So on Zoom, if people are watching and have a question, they can put a question in the Q&A, putting their name and address, and when I'm asked to read them aloud, I will, but they could be answered live. Generally, the process is the board opens the meeting, there's a presentation, the board asks questions, and they open it to the public, and everything should be addressed to the chair. All questions back and forth. So that's the process for this evening. And if you haven't signed in, it'd be great if you would on the list at some point.
Can I just ask that people speak up a little bit?
Yeah.
I was gonna actually say that because I watched the zoning
Yeah.
board meeting last night, so everybody needs to speak with their cheerleading voice, so that the public can hear us and it can go, because I think the mic is coming out of you, right? So it's very difficult for people on the Zoom, to hear. Let me also say, in terms of public comments, since we have actually been discussing these particular topics over the last actually four meetings, but two of which were canceled. Please note that making public comments should be new comments, because we keep all comments as a running total that inform our deliberation. So if you wish to speak, please keep in mind that what we're asking you to do is to make statements about information that you don't already have in the record, so that we can maintain the time of the meeting. So thank you very much for that. So the first item of business is a reopening of the public hearing of the zoning bylaw for an application for large house review filed by Innes Capital Partners LLC. The subject property is Moody Hill Road, lot 32, house number is pending, and this has been continued from May 26th. And we will wait for the applicant. Thank you very much. So the first item of the first part of the conversation is to ask the applicant if you have any information you'd like to contribute. And let me note that we're going to try to keep things to the time that we've set for the hearing, and that means it was to start at 6:30, so we're about 7 minutes off. And if you can keep your comments to 10 minutes, then we'll be able to bring all this together. If you need more time, that's fine too.
And if you could project, so we have Zoom going as well, and we have that. They see.
So.
Okay, so I think we left off. Are we picking up where we left off?
Yes,
Basically,
correct.
so I guess the only new information we would have is from Jeff Morris regarding test pit.
All right, thank you.
Yeah, so following the last hearing, we did go out to the property and excavate test pits within the footprint of the house as well as the drainage to confirm the assumptions. And we only had one minor change. We moved the smaller dry well by about 12 to 15 feet. Otherwise, no change.
Thank you. That you would like to say anything? All right, planning board members, do you have comments?
Just so everyone knows, this is the upper project.
Correct.
The things that, were, important about this is public, comments, with the large condo building next door. Some of the members who lived there had a number of comments about this particular project. If I remember correctly, there were comments about the extent to which vegetation had been removed prior to the hearing process, as well as, what is, proposed on the site engineering plan. If I remember correctly, the architecture, I think I made some comments on the architecture, and those comments were, I think, adequately responded to in terms of some minor design modifications, not major, minor design modifications. But I certainly thought those were satisfactory changes to the architecture. We've had some comments about lighting. You know, I think that your comment about light going over water in great distances, sometimes it can be annoying if it's a spot right on here. I believe the applicant said there's one spotlight on the driveway, but it could have a screen on it. And I'm sorry, I may be conflating that with the other project, but there's no spotlight over the garage.
There was one over the driveway, John, so yeah.
Okay, I remember that. Okay. And certainly, some screening or dark sky fixtures is a way to ameliorate that particular potential objectionable aspect of the project. I mean, in general, the light fixtures that were picked were quality light fixtures, the lamping, and whether it shines in somebody's bedroom window, those things like that, may be the thing that is critical. Those were my recollections of where we left off and sort of the status of the project. I don't know. Who wants to?
I just
Pick up and say comments.
I just pick up and say that I think that, in light of the scope of the large home review, I think that I need to move forward with the project. I understand the applicant's concerns. I mean, I understand the abutters' concerns in the Windy Hill neighborhood. Unfortunately, I think we're put in a position as planning board that it's really not necessarily the right forum, to be able to restrict this project in the ways in which the abutters would necessarily hope. I do think that the native species that are there that fall behind the pool area, in the left corner, that I think fall down a little bit more and come up from the street, I would be willing to and open to placing the limited condition on there that, you know, those would be protected so they wouldn't be further taken down. Because I think those, and I think we walked the site when we were over there together, and, you know, I think we had that conversation kind of briefly. You know, the beauty of being kind of back in live again is that, you know, I really want the abutters to understand that I'm very sympathetic to, you know, every issue that's been raised. And it's not my desire to rule one way or the other. It's just my desire to rule within the confines of what I'm allowed to do under the large home review. And when an applicant comes in front of me, I have to look at that large home review and say, this is what I'm allowed to do, and this is what I'm not allowed to do, and what's my comfort level of going outside those boundaries. And I think you guys have made concessions from the last project that's come before us. And I think in consistency with all the other large home reviews that I've at least seen, I wouldn't feel comfortable not approving this outside of those conditions with regards to cutting down any additional native species or trees that currently exist, particularly, you know, that back left corner.
Okay, thank you. Paul Brady?
Are you sure? You talking about 2 large trees?
Two cedars?
I wish I could see. I could tell you if I saw, but unfortunately, Paul, I don't know if I can tell you the difference between a cedar and a birch. I'm not that good at that stuff. I know a nice tree when I look at it, but I don't know if I can tell you the difference. The 2 older trees.
I mean, there's a few cedars on this property, I'm not sure which ones were,
You probably were talking about them.
but the ones in the pool area or the
So
ones?
please direct
Sorry.
conversations to me. You can direct conversations to me. Thank you. So go ahead.
I'm just trying to find clarity on which cedar trees were referring.
I'm referring to the 2 lines that I believe they were cedars, but
large trees that were referred to by you, the abutters. I was asking about those.
And if I can clarify, I believe you're speaking about the northwest corner of the property adjacent to where the swimming pool is currently planned.
You wanna point to those, Jeff?
Yeah, so the individual abutters are on the plan, but they are in this area right here. More of the larger ones, I believe, we're referring to these in the corner. We modified the design. Right. So we talked about the back left corner of the property. There's some
We're
evergreens
talking
there.
about the vegetation that will abut the swimming pool.
Oh, right here.
Yes, correct.
If the grade actually falls off very significantly, it would actually not, I think it. Yeah, it did appear, so maybe there's a little slight concession because that would be workable, it seemed like. It did seem like there's a grade that falls off in the back left corner, on the property towards, abutting Jerusalem. That wouldn't seem like it would make much sense if you interfere with it.
If I remember correctly, the grade was changing, and that's why the trees had to come out as a part of, we asked the tenants to be relocated?
At some point, yeah.
Yes,
Right.
So on our original.
I don't remember what the answer was.
We had more tree clearing on the original submittal, and then, following a conservation hearing, we tightened up that limit of work in the erosion barrier, and then we staked that in the field. I believe there are two cedar trees that may be the ones you're talking about, right in this corner.
There's another set of trees right there too, yeah.
Yeah, the ones in this corner do have to go because they're very close to the house and they fall directly within that dry well in the grading. If you're referring to trees in this other area of some clearing, they could probably be worked around. Maybe there's
Those are the
a
ones I
well
was
around a
already
tree.
talking about, the back left.
Yeah, this area they probably could be seen.
Yeah.
It might require a retaining wall going around it
I
or
think that's
something.
maybe something we.
All right. All right, that's very helpful and clarifying. Tom?
I'm still of the belief that the other partners, those C1D is involved here, my preference would be to see the existing tree line maintained around the northeast, north, and northwest. That would be my preference. My other concern though is that we don't normally put large conversations in writing much less record them, but I'm concerned about a future property owner being aware of the fact that we might put some restrictions on field and vegetation on this lot, and how we're gonna know that, and how we're gonna respect that. And then as far as can be recorded decisions. Assuming we put a condition that limits the vegetation, I would want that on record in the title so that future homeowners know. Respect that people. Normal life things that I don't even know that future owners are even aware of. Because there's even a permit, and it's a physical study, and we usually don't put it in writing until it's on hand. So that's my concern. I would like to see that tree line all the way around the north. On the right side of that. And I think that does it mean, I don't think it means losing it to it, I think it means maybe trading it or shifting it or changing its size. It's a big rectangle at the moment, but I think both things can be accommodated.
The new bylaw that just got passed, the land clearing, since no building permits have been pulled for these two projects, these would be subject to that.
No, it was already ruled that it's grandfathered in because we're in the middle of the process.
They didn't apply for a building.
No, but they made their application for this relief.
So these would be accepted from that,
That is correct.
separate process.
Other comments from the planning board?
Oh, I didn't know if you got shut off.
No, I didn't get shut off. I was fine with it, so.
So I'd like to make two comments about and I appreciate think, that was very important in understanding what the topographic consequences are of runoff. We show on the map essentially along the property line, an outfall for where the excess water that would perhaps be generated in a large storm that would actually come out and go along the property line of the first house, correct?
Correct.
And, if we were to have a large storm and it was to fill, then it would fall into the property of the house in front of it. And, I don't personally think that's an appropriate, strategy for the solution of water that could be generated, that would essentially cause a flooding problem for somebody in the next yard. You know that in advance. Second point is that you're talking about putting in a culvert on the driveway that will take water from the other, cul-de-sac, box and bring it down along the driveway, and then it will exit onto Windy Hill, is that correct?
Yeah.
Where is the water gonna go?
So the water from the upper portion of the driveway, that's being, where the driveway's being extended, is being captured in a stone trench that has a perforated pipe going into a manhole. And then also going across the driveway is a, metal grate going across, and that's going, capturing that runoff and putting it into the cul-de-sac system.
So it will not come down on the driveway?
Yeah.
Okay,
That stone trench going along the edge of the driveway down to Windy Hill was added at the, request of the Conservation Commission. Currently there's a paved driveway there. They asked when it's resurfaced if they could cross pitch it to a stone trench to slow the amount of runoff.
so is there any requirement that the water condition that would be coming out of that actually be in some way, relieved of its, any sort of, contaminant or any sort of, materials?
Yeah, so certainly the stone trench works as a filter, where currently there is not one, which runs off down the driveway.
But does that filter meet the standards of what would be required for water that could make it into Straight Pond?
So the upper portion is captured in what I talked about the stone trench in the manhole. And the manhole hole has a T on it, so that, yes, so the grease will stay on the top, solids go to the bottom, the clean water leaving it. The bottom part of the driveway, you're not doing the full removal there, but you're improving the existing conditions that you really can with the site constraints.
So you couldn't put a filter of any type so that you don't end up with, materials ending up in, because it's just gonna go right down to.
Well, that's exactly what the stone trench is doing.
Okay, but will the stone trench end up filling up with, debris and material over time, just simply because of the continuous nature of runoff?
So, yeah, there's certainly maintenance involved, and we do have an operation and maintenance plan that goes with it. It's, I believe it's 2 feet wide by 2 feet deep of crushed stone wrapped in filter fabric. So because of that filter fabric, that portion of it really should not clog up. Above that, you have 6 inches of either pea stone or mulch, and that is where periodically you may need to scrape off to replace it if it clogs up. Due to, say, sand or sanding or whatever.
So that information will carry to the homeowner so that they will understand that they have a maintenance responsibility to remove any sort of debris that would end up in Straight Pond.
It does, it's a separate document as part of the stormwater application to conservation.
Okay. We don't see those documents, so we don't actually know when we ask these questions to be informed.
Back to your previous comment about runoff going to the front lot, lot 31. The standard that you're held to is that you have to reduce the rates and the volumes of runoff to the down gradient points. In this case, lot 31 is down gradient. When it rains, the water sheet flows onto that lot. In the proposed conditions here, that water is captured, infiltrated, and then it does have an overflow for the larger storms. That goes to a level spreader to displace it evenly in that area. And ultimately, there's less water going to that front lot than currently. You could never hold back a 100-year storm event on this lot, or really any lot. That's just not a way.
Okay, so would that information be conveyed whoever is the property owner of the house in front.
Yes.
So they will know in advance that a 100-year flood or a 100-year storm could potentially end up with water in their backyard.
They're downhill.
No, I know, but you're putting a trench in, and, one of the questions is there an alternative where you either move the water off of the property further down, and, into that system you built on the driveway, rather than just having it go right in the middle of that backyard.
Low infiltration over the grass and then through the wooded area and vegetated area before getting down to the final design point. We position that level spreader in an area where it's not going to flood that neighbor's house, only going across the lawn, not going towards the foundation.
Okay,
I think it's the best solution.
okay, then we don't see that information, all we can do is do that, but. Other comments from the board members, otherwise I will turn to the public, but please remember that I've asked that new information can be introduced into this conversation, but if what you want to say is what we've heard already, for the sake of being able to move the process along, we would appreciate that you don't comment.
We do a stormwater permit approval, right?
We have a hearing tomorrow night. We had another.
But you're in front of them though.
Yeah, we've been going through the process. We got a few hearings, we got the site walk.
Okay.
And then we had, I forget if it was a forum or a Zoom issue or a hearing, but.
So would a member of the public like to speak about something that's new, that we have not heard from? Please state your name and your address, and, you'll be held to 3 minutes in the presentation. If you want to stand up, because it'll get better for people, that's fine, otherwise, you say,
I'm just being the citizen. I think it's I just have 2 questions. The first one is this, I can't see.
okay, so if you want to stand up and look, that's fine, but also keep in mind, you want to direct your comments to me, that I will order them for the applicant.
I'm just wondering, this storm trench that goes down, I know it's a dangerous section of Jerusalem Road in the winter, and I'd actually skidded quite, that's stupid. I'm just wondering if the water is going under the road, or if it's going on the road, in terms of how it's coming out of there.
So there's a storm drain, that is about, 50 feet from the driveway before you hit Jerusalem Road, and that is where the water would end up, unless it was a massive storm, and then the water would probably travel across Jerusalem Road, and it has in the past.
And I do appreciate all the questions clarifying, but the second thing I'm wondering about is, you referred to some native plantings, that would be preserved. And I'm just wondering, since a lot of trees were taken down prior to what happened before things got going, I'm wondering if it's possible to, put in more native plants in some of these rather than cultivars to really, build up the environment. This is a very, special environment with with some that are here. I know this is a conservation commission, but since you brought it up,
So thank you, and, I'll direct that to the applicant.
Can I just make one comment?
Yes, ma'am.
We have not cleared a single piece of vegetation on this lot.
Thank you. And that has actually been entered into the record already, so we appreciate that.
So native trees are proposed, and,
Can you speak up louder, please?
native trees are proposed, and there's 39 of them on this small site. They include red maple, eastern red cedars, white pine, eastern white cedars, and pin oaks, as well as numerous shrubs and ground cover.
All right, thank you for that response. Okay, please, state your name
Madam Chair, my name is Thomas Carroll.
and also remember that it needs new information.
Yes, I'm raising the question.
Thank you.
And the question is this: Mr. Potter referenced that he felt that he or his body did not have the power to set certain conditions. This is the topic that's been discussed at a number of meetings in this property. This is not the venue for creating conditions or limitations on large homes. What is?
So many communities don't have a large home review at all. As a matter of fact, the majority of communities in Massachusetts do not have a large home review. The challenge is the actual articulation of the regulation and the authority that we have to regulate anything. And it's highly limited to a set of features that were developed when it was originally constructed. So we can take the limit of what our capability is, but beyond that, we cannot go.
Just to add to that, we approved, or as is, or we approved with conditions, and we added that approved with conditions. Because 4 years ago, all we could do is review and approve. Now, as of the last 4 years, we can approve with conditions. The conditions can be whatever we think is relevant, critical, or important.
So direct your comments to you.
Then, Madam Chair, why should conditions not make scale and verticality?
Because it isn't specified as such in a large house review in that manner.
Then there's a large house review.
The large house review has limited capacity to alter a physical structure that somebody proposes.
It's limited to, let me just add one more comment. We're basically limiting our review to the criteria that we have in the large home review. We look at mass and scale and elements and circulation, plantings, lighting, all kinds of aspects of the design. But to the extent that it's not specifically a part of the criteria of review, then that's generally not the areas that we would have condition in our approval for.
We just don't have standing to do that.
Because I think, the question is a lot of what I've said over the past, my understanding in talking, and you would have a good insight into this, but large home review was initially put into place for just that reason, that large home review to allow neighbors to know what was being built next to them. And it was supposed to be a review process to kind of inform neighbors and abutters when it originally was put into place, I believe.
Yeah.
From what I understand it to be. The problem here that I think that we have is that from a property rights standpoint, it's difficult to have a large home review that circumvents or supersedes zoning bylaws. So if you have a zoning bylaw that says you can do A, B, and C, and we come in as a large home review board, planning board of 5 people, and then supersede that and override that and say, no, this is what you can do, we're kind of going against the property rights and the natural line of way things work from a legal standpoint, in my opinion. The right venue is to go about as citizens and say, let's amend the zoning bylaws, which is why sometimes you sense frustration for me that, because I do want towns, neighborhoods, and class to be preserved. But the nature of it is that this wasn't the original intent of the large home review venue. And now we can put some limited conditions in, but we are handcuffed to a certain degree as to what we can do really from an authority scope perspective, in my opinion.
Madam Chair, I have read the language of the large home review and scale and as appropriate for surrounding areas is mentioned as an objective of the large home review, but it seems that there's no ability to contain scale. In this particular case, if there's ever been a case that fits the criteria that I think the large home review is driving for, this is it.
And you've made that point before, and there is sympathy on this board about this issue, but unfortunately, there is no mechanism by which we can act on that language to circumvent the construction of a house that meets the criteria of the large house review overall. We are literally like this. So I appreciate your comments, but we can't keep pursuing this because we can't really do
zoning mechanism that addresses scale compared to a lot is lot coverage and building size. That's in the table of,
Area regulation.
that, those are, and these guys are well below the maximum threshold.
Right, so, I would take the last question as long as it's new information. Is it,
Okay, so my name is Virginia Brophy, 16 Beach Street, Cohasset. I was actually going to say 3 comments. One of them was the venue question, because if this isn't the appropriate venue, it's a dead horse, it's been beaten. But I would take exception to the comment that the large home review is only for notice to the neighbors.
So that's what it was before.
I take exception
We
to that,
changed it 4
because
years
the
ago.
reality is that the fact is that you have to go to the planning board and the notice has to be presented to the public. I was just looking at the notices downstairs, and they don't have anything to do with a large home review, but it's the notice. So there's more than just notice for the large home review. And I think that what you really need to do is you need to take the totality of the whole document. They're not going to say, you know, A, B, C, and spell it out for you, what you can and you can't do. Well, if you look at all the sections, and I'll end it here, because we've already covered all this. But I did have 2 other questions. One is no one curious about why they made that change? Because he presented that he had one change, moving something 12 to 15 feet.
Because
So
we requested more information, and so did the, Concom, to understand the strategy that they had to manage the water on the site. So they did exactly what they should have done to try to mitigate as much as possible the water that was going to be generated as a result of the structure.
So that change that you mentioned at the beginning of the meeting, when you said if you have any changes to present, that was something that was specifically requested?
Yes.
Okay, well, I must have missed that. And then the other question I had was, I thought, and probably something was lost in translation, that at the last meeting, it was stated that none of the plantings were going to be decided upon until they had gone before Concom. And my understanding is that the Concom meeting was delayed because of technical difficulties. So have you been before the Concom to decide upon the plantings at all, or?
So you need to direct your question to me.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Thank you. And Jeff, would you like to answer that?
Yes, we have had multiple hearings with conservation and subject, but
And when, I will ask you, when you see Concom tomorrow, you'll be presenting this information, will you also be discussing the plantings?
the plantings have
It's
been,
really outside of their bailiwick.
the plantings have been discussed in each of the hearings, and there really haven't been any changes to them, nothing significant. I do feel that the commission is comfortable with it, to the best of my knowledge.
Right. And so, what we have done over the course of the hearings with this applicant has moved from a relatively modest vegetative strategy to a much denser strategy with many more plantings. And that's the best that we can do with the authority that we have. So thank you.
Well, I think to say, I appreciate everyone's time here. You're all volunteers. You put in every single week. The reality is that this is the legacy of this board. Okay, so we're all going to be gone, and we are among, you say the house is going to be gone.
Yeah, but thank you very much.
Yeah, we really appreciate it. Thank you.
Please, okay. And then I want to
You
move
have,
on.
you have the board's, entering sympathy, but also we are the citizens too of the town. And you take that up to zoning bylaws, you know, the board is limited, as you said, and the time. Much as we like to do, we like to take it, but we have to follow the law. Laid down by the town, but it is giving everybody in this room, equity and right to go before zoning, lobby for changes, and work with it to get the board a little more people. So we can do what we can do,
So thank
but
you.
again, we are constrained on what we can do.
All right, let's move on because we're about 10 minutes behind the meeting.
Chairwoman?
I know, I recognize her. Somebody said you wanted to say something, is it new information?
It is a reference to the body.
Please say your name and your address.
Sure. My name is Kathy Garrett, and I'm 646 and, so I'm on the bar, bylaw was referenced, but I have a question for you, that if I may. And I would like to know, has there been any further clarification of the land alteration bylaw, after we came forward? Specifically, once the bylaw has been approved by the attorney general.
Can I tell you that this is exempted from it because it started the process prior to that particular election. So it does not apply to this case.
My question is, it becomes retroactive, but not the bylaw and it's right.
It does, but this project is grandfathered in as a result of the fact that it started the process before this was passed.
Retroactive to the date as of the county, this application was made before town meeting. So it's not.
But I'm asking because this is ongoing and,
No.
so any cases that are ongoing or currently being viewed, this is bylaw does not apply. Correct, I'm asking.
I ask you, what is your total lot? Okay. Did you comply with the?
Yes.
With the new bylaws, you comply?
So the clearing activity would equal less than 1% of the lot size, according to bylaw. We would be less than 1%.
Actually, farther than that.
It's 30%. 30% of the lot.
So the bylaw says the amount of clearing activity,
Anyone?
new one, divided by the square footage of the lot. So that would put us at less than 1% of the amount of clearing that we have.
All right, so, I'd like to, move this now to,
Do you have any comments from Zoom people?
No comments from the Zoom.
We have a lot of people.
The Zoom people are quiet.
Can we make a motion, someone make a motion to close the public hearing and deliberate and vote on it?
I'll move it, vote.
Back in a second.
roll call vote, Clark Brewer,
I approve or not?
Tom Callahan, Paul Grady, Eric Potter, Amy Glassmeyer, aye. So that what it means now is that we cannot accept any further information, and we will be discussing amongst ourselves a set of conditions on this project, as a part of the approval process. So I have, some conditions that were sent in to, Lauren Lynn.
And I would just like to add, what I brought up before about dark sky technology pictures, and that, the flight pictures being screened, from being cast off-site. The light being cast off-site.
All right, thank you. Paul Grady, do you have conditions?
I'd like to hear what Concom has to say.
We can't really do that, we can do it more time.
The concern comes on stormwater, but not within the jurisdiction of our state. Not on the criteria.
Tom Callahan?
So again, I would approve this with the condition that the existing tree line along the north and north sides of the proposed house is preserved. And so conditioning that, making a finding under 5.4C1D that, claims that the vegetation has not been minimized, needs to be preserved. I would also make a condition that we reduce this to lighting and that the written decision be supported by the applicant.
All right, thanks for that. Eric Potter? Would you like, I was gonna say, it has to be filed with the town clerk, and then once it's stamped by the town clerk, it can be recorded.
I would concur with Tom's, conditions. The only question I have there is, would that be effectively a restriction? Or because it's an approval with conditions, can that be an approval with restrictions as regards to title?
It could potentially be looked at as a call on the title, but as long as they are compliant with those restrictions, then it shouldn't be an issue.
But it would provide notice, so that's the important thing.
Correct.
Yeah, that's.
If somebody has another creative
No, I
way,
think it's a good idea.
if somebody has another creative way to defeat their own, aware of this.
I think it's a great idea.
Okay, so
Good.
can you just restate?
I restate what Tom said, I think those are, I concur with what Tom said.
All right. Is there any further comment from planning board members?
For the other conditions.
Those are the conditions which, supposed to accept to us and, that can be approved.
So there's no other.
No, else, I've asked everybody and I, concur with what Tom, I wrote something very similar. So,
Okay, motion there somewhere?
yes, can you take a motion? Tom, go ahead.
Yeah, the dark side.
I have it in.
When Tom makes a motion. You have dark side of it. Your motion.
Move that we approve the, outcome review, for the project, the following conditions. That the dark sky, light fixtures and flooring, throughout the site. That we make finding on the 5.4 C1A, the work required vegetated by the meeting. Pursuant to C1B, or the site work conducted in a service center, the work is proposed to not minimize changes to existing vegetation targeted. And as a result of those two findings, that we preserve the existing tree line on the northeast, north, and northwest sides of the proposed building. Further condition that this will reduce the lighting by the town clerk and that they stamped by the town clerk that it be recorded that they have the building. I believe we have 14 days to reduce it there.
Can we do a roll call vote? No.
Is there any other comments?
Okay, roll call vote, Clark Brewer.
Clark Brewer, aye.
Tom Callahan. Paul Brady. Eric Potter.
Eric Potter, aye.
Amy Glassmeyer, aye. Thank you very much for coming. All right, the next, hearing is, a reopening of the public hearing, pursuant to MGL chapter 48 and 300-20-4, 300-20-6, and 300-18 of the Cohasset zoning bylaws for a combined village business district special permit and site plan review application filed by Marvel Properties LLC. The subject property is 1 Pleasant Street. This is a continuation of the hearing which was started on the 12th of May.
So we just.
Oh, we're gonna continue this. Yep.
Right.
23rd, right?
So it's gonna be at 8:30 and, 8:30 and on 6:23 Manchester.
So moved.
Wait a minute, can I get the time?
Yes, 8:30.
30. Next week, the 23rd,
Second.
right?
That's it, and then you just need to vote.
Right, so, can I get, a motion to approve?
I already made a motion.
And I got a second.
Roll call vote, Clark
Clark
Brewer,
Brewer, aye.
Tom Callahan.
No, we didn't vote on this one. Clark, motion approved. I second it. Clark said, aye, you're up for aye.
Motion to continue.
Yes,
Paul Brady. Eric Potter.
Eric Potter, aye.
Amy Glassmeyer, aye. Thank you very much. The next is a, public hearing, pursuant to MGL chapter 40A and 300-12 of the Cohasset zoning bylaw for an application for site plan review filed by Mr. John Schiavo. The subject property is 147 South Main. This is a continuation from May 12th. And looks like the applicant and representative are here for this, hearing. So first we would ask is, do you have any information you'd like to include?
Yes, thank you. Good evening, everyone. My name is Adam Brodsky. It's nice to see you in person after a very
long time. And I represent John Scavo as trustee of the Scavo Family Trust. Let me make introductions. You know Jeff Hassett from Morse Engineering, our professional engineer. I'm Mr. Scavo. Dick Rockwood from Rockwood Design, our architect, together with Pat Fisher from Fisher Associates, another architect, and he's providing us with assistance on code compliance. And the answer is yes, we have provided additional information. And so I have a list of deliverables from our last meeting. You asked for a copy of our support letter to the Zoning Board of Appeals with relation to our application for special permits. You raised questions regarding ADA compliance, and so we have submitted revised architectural plans, which hopefully will address those concerns. And Dick and Pat are prepared to speak to those issues. And we've made some minor revisions to the site plans based on comments from you as well as comments from the Conservation Commission. And Jeff will describe those to you, including updated gross floor area calculations to account for the changes in the architectural plans. And lastly, we did provide a fire department fire truck suite of SWEP analysis. I don't know if that's present tense or past tense. Jeff will describe that and explain that we've got sign off from the fire department. So with that brief introduction, I'll turn it over to Dick and Pat to take you through this revised architectural plan. Where do you want to do this so I can get everywhere? It's very different than my dining room table.
I have to say, while you're setting that up, it's some people I have seen over the last year, like I saw Clark, actually I saw you where you were completely mountain with a cigar in your mouth, but I've seen you a few times. I've seen like Paul, I've seen a few other, but some of you I haven't seen for over a year, and it's like kind of a little surreal to be in like a live environment. You know, it is a little bit like, it's a little bit like, wow.
It is very odd.
That's right, Tom, I have found that out.
If I look older, I'm not older.
Oh, I am so nice to see you.
Yeah, we might have to renew some social skills that we lost over the
Yes,
last year.
and some procedural
We
skills. All right.
Hi, I'm Dick Rockwood. Yeah, we're.
I've got you on.
You're on television.
Okay. This is the project, you know, yeah. So, based on what we had, the last time, the subject was brought up about the handicap, issues, so we went a little deeper into some of the handicap issues, made some adjustments on the footprint to make it more compliant. And the only modifications that we made to the actual structure itself was a couple of small dormers on the third floor. The third floor was always part of the structure as far as being a usable space. We were just going to use it for storage. And we had to make an adjustment on it so we could get the gas room in there. Because as you'll see, our floor plans changed because of the space it took. We should probably move to. And so we now have moved one of the two, each unit has 2 bedrooms, so they still have 2 bedrooms right now, that hasn't changed. But they became so small within the space that we put a bedroom in the attic. We had to use this space right here to make it a common, accessible situation with a lift in the hallway.
Originally, we had 3 apartments, each with their own separate entrance and stairway. So now we combined it, so there's 1 common stairway and 1 common corridor. And when you get to the upper level, you'll be in a common corridor, which will then feed you into each of the 3 units. More traditional apartment design layout, apartment building design layout.
So the footprint of the building is exactly the same size, and the same square footage. It's just that we lost this space in here to make it compliant.
And Mr. Dick, you've installed those lifts so that also handicapped people will have access to the residential units.
Yes.
And then the third floor is now outfitted with a bedroom and a bath and for each apartment. And the third floor is accessed from within the units. There is no common space on the third level. So it's a walk up from the first level to the second level of the apartment.
So if I'm correct, the footprint of the project has not changed.
Not changed at all.
And the building height, I think it's changed in very minor respects.
If it did, it might have been a relationship of that average grade, some adjustment, we're talking inches. And
Again, below maximum building height.
Right, again, we have to hold the maximum building height.
And then there's just a dormer to accommodate the lift.
Yes, and each unit.
So you're saying the height complies with zoning?
Yes.
Do we have copies of these new drawings
Yes.
and material?
Full size.
They're in the office.
And then electronically.
All of this has been submitted previously.
We can read these for tonight if you like them.
I'm sure we have them.
Yeah.
That's it, we have them.
Any questions?
Clark, would you like to comment on the changes since you were the one who raised this issue?
Oh, God. I mean, I think that, making those units so that they are accessible, to people with disabilities is great. And, you know, even, sometimes if you, have, 10 bags of groceries, just don't take the stairs. That's, convenience. I mean, the whole building is, under the regular IBC code, the IBC 2015 with the, Mass Building Code Edition 9. And, I don't honestly know if the one stair to the second floor works or not, but in the code review, you guys are, registered professionals, so.
4 dwelling units on the floor allows you to have one means of egress if the building is fully sprinkled to 903.3.1.
So you can have one means of egress from the floor, provided the occupancy is under 50, and, the stair itself is fire rated, the door to it is fire rated, stuff like that.
Right, and you still have to offer the emergency egress windows.
Yeah.
If you only have the one. You have the 2 stairs, you don't need the emergency egress windows, but 1 stair you do need the emergency egress windows.
Right. Did you, you didn't have a review that with the building inspector? The building inspector?
Oh, no,
Okay.
not really at that point yet, we didn't feel, yeah. And we can,
Well,
yeah.
it wouldn't be a bad idea. I mean, in terms of the things for site plan, full compliance with the building code isn't the most important or pressing issue.
Mhm.
Under 12.6. That's the zoning bylaw. 300 12.6. Yeah, site plan. This is site plan review. That's what it is. Under our zoning bylaw, 12.6. Says right here, 300-12, right. So the issues that we, are the things that we see, and mitigating pollution, making sure it complies with zoning,
And these
things
units,
like that.
yeah, because we have access, because we have access to this floor now, these 3 units will be group 1 dwelling units, which means they'll be designed so a person in a wheelchair can maneuver anywhere on the first floor. They can use the bedroom, they can use the bathroom, they can use the kitchen.
Yeah.
The 18 and 12 on the pull and push side of your door, the clearance of the tub. So it's 3 more units that are beyond the market for the disabled community. And we're having a shortage on the South Shore of those types of units. So this, these units will be adding to the town.
Yeah, I've always thought it was a pain to have, the requirement to basically have a 3-foot door for every single thing in an accessible unit. And if the manufacturers would just make 12 doors, you can use them everywhere, and it still gives you
We know they've done in the past, they used a two-way door and then put, a
offset.
hinge on it.
Yeah,
That
yeah.
allows it to fully open,
Right.
so the doors actually gets behind the frame. Now you've got your 32-inch clear minimum.
Eric's like fascinating.
Inside the ball. Always learning something.
I don't have any other comments on the architectural plan that they changes that based on my comments from, in previous hearings, so, I'm satisfied that to the extent that this is a 12.6 site plan review.
Right.
That my comments have been addressed.
All right,
Whether they're correct or not, 100%, I don't know, I think that's ultimately for the building inspector to decide.
all right. Eric Clark?
Looking close to this project, I'm pleased with the way everything looks, definitely pleased with what the applicants come back with and all the changes that are made. So I would have no comments, or further requests. Like I said, this is a site that I am very familiar with, just through my proximity to it in town. And, I think this would be something that would fit in very, very well with that area of town. It's kind of a little bit of a weird, kind of a tail end of residential coming in the village, so this will be a nice kind of incorporation of things, and the fact that it's handicap accessible and the way it looks from the drawings, I think is gonna be a nice addition to that space.
All right, thank you. Paul Green?
No, I have no comment.
Howard?
Just quickly, what's the buffer to the residential neighbors on the county line?
So maybe Jeff can give you a quick overview of the site plan and the minor changes to that and can answer your question.
I'm just concerned about the buffer to the residential neighbors on one side and back.
This is a screen.
Yes, I don't know if there's a fence or anything, but
Yeah, there's a 6-foot tall stockade fence that goes around the entire perimeter. In addition, there are evergreen plantings along Spring Street and also along the edge of the property, and then street trees throughout the parking lot. Deciduous trees.
The way you have the trees, on Spring Street, have you thought about the visual consequences of the trees and where they're going to be specifically located? Is that going to be any sort of a problem as traffic comes down around?
You mean like sight lines?
Yeah.
No, it's not on a bending South Main Street, and these are deciduous trees, so the canopy will be above the eye line.
Okay. Thank you. So I'd like to raise a point then that was directed to us, and for which you also received the documentation from one of the abutters that indicated that the site had been used for various types of vehicular repair that included petroleum products. And there was a statement that we shared with you that was given to us that indicated that the possibility was that there had been contamination that was placed on the ground. And we reviewed the history of the site and see that there's been mitigation of the neighbor site in terms of petroleum. We also saw the documentation as a result of the fire, but that specific abutter's comments indicated a concern that the site had been contaminated, and there was further record that the actual cement foundation that was slab that was now visible had two sites on top of it that were filled in with cement. I'm only commenting on what we heard. It's my responsibility to do that. Well, no, they look like they're hydraulic lift.
So we're happy to answer questions. I believe the others have inaccurate information. Galo can tell you regarding the fact that I believe the references to cement has nothing to do with tanks, but what is it?
So, that was when I did inspection stickers, and I know they were around town, and I got the and things like that. So we thought my kind of, obviously, Adams produced we went from mass heat to, right off, like, understand that there is no contamination.
Right, so I mean, you're hearing rumors of
I understand that.
contamination from interested parties. All that we can tell you is that, there was a fire, that as a result of that fire, there was a release of oil and hazardous materials, and again, it's all spelled out in the permanent solutions submittal that's submitted to you. So, with respect to those contaminants of concern, there had to be assessment, and ultimately remediation was done in connection with, in compliance with the Massachusetts contingency plan, with the 2020 regulations given by the ASHE report. We've seen no other evidence of contamination on the site, but as I said to the board, that if during construction, we open up the ground and there's evidence of contamination, we have a legal obligation to make a reportable condition, to report it to DEP, and then take appropriate action to comply with the state statute. As I mentioned, it's a very rigorous program. Amongst all of the enforcement matters that I've dealt with in my area of expertise, failure to report contamination is not tolerated in the Commonwealth and is subject to significant penalty. And so we're going to comply with the law. There's no evidence that there's contamination. I think the activities that were described were overstated and inaccurate. But if you put a shovel in the ground and you find petroleum contamination in the soil, work stops. A licensed site professional is hired. The Board of Health is notified. DEP is notified, and we're going to be in the system to address it.
Thank you. When we get information from the public, we want to make sure that it ends up in the record. That's our duty to represent everybody and to make sure that the information that we are given gets lost. So that's why.
No, we understand. We're trying to use.
Right. So we're meeting in the middle.
Example, we tied into the sewer line, everybody was involved, there was no contamination on it. We tied into the sewer line, we tied through of the sewer line.
I mean, we have to balance the butters comments.
No, I.
We have residents next to the site that talk about the scent and smell, and so it's our responsibility to just be ready to.
Right, and they accurately describe what those photographs show. So, for example,
The tank cover, what was the tank cover?
it's not a tanker, it's the anchor for the dynamometer, which is the machine we use for testing the products. So, and nothing whatsoever to do with either a hydraulic or any sites.
And Mass DEP was there to do the complete process of what we did and they signed off.
So if they signed off on the fire, that nothing was released during as a consequence of the fire.
No, actually, there were things that were raised as a result of fire, as a result of the fire water that was dispersed.
Yeah.
And so there was evidence of contaminants, no levels of contaminants in the soil and in the water samples that were collected and sent to the fire. And all of that was remediated through formatory testing. So it addressed, and I've been very clear about this, it addressed all the contaminants that were generated as a result of
We've gone over this about 4 times already. It's a clean 2020 report.
Yes.
So the Massachusetts is not going to, the DEP is not going to issue a clean 21E if there's contaminants in the soil. So I think that that's.
But this
address.
particular concern was not about this, the actual fire. It was a concern that was expressed about something that had happened historically. So that is why we had to actually bring this up as part of the public record. But if they're two separate things, they're not the same. We gave the applicant a letter, which is our responsibility to do that. So the airing of the issue has been completed.
Was the property ever had a someone before the fire?
There was no need for it because there's never been a history of any other release. So we did do soil testing on the property there, the property next door, and the one next door to that. So the soil testing was done all.
You guys had a licensed site professional as a part of the fire remediation. So if there was any idea there might be some historical pollution, but presumably the licensed site professional would identify that.
Right.
I mean, typically what I see with contaminated sites, if they're contaminated, like they had gas stations there and underground storage tanks and things is, they do test wells, they see if there's contamination of the groundwater and or of the soils if they're dry, and they try to contain it and they come up with a remediation plan.
So
But
I think we can actually draw this part of the discussion to a conclusion. The point was to make sure that the information was presented into the record as we requested to do.
Yeah.
And we can move on.
And I would just ask, does council have any comments on following up on this for this site plan review?
I actually worked for the state in the planning program originally when it was back, and you don't get a thing coming in report unless the area that was the subject of the notice was cleaned up and that area was cleaned. To the extent that there is something, as Adam said, when they put a shovel in the ground, just like in any other project, in any other location, what you find, you have to report and do it. But you can't anticipate that there may or may not be something without any indication. Right, thank you. And the question is, with the inspector was quite similar to the comments and the comments in general. All I'm saying is, with the information is public record. So looking at, Jen,
This is related, Madam Chair, so I thought we actually do have a comment from, Michelle Gibson, who lives next door at 143, and she says, I'm the butter 143 South Main Street. No testing has ever been done on my property or at the site as it pertains to what is underneath the cement slab. I think it's related. I just want to put it in the record.
right,
And,
and if, I don't know if she can hear us, but what she should hear from us is that should, when they put a shovel in the ground, there's something there that would have to be remediated before they continue the project.
Right.
So at some point, I mean, because I know the concern is a question of smell, if something was to emerge, they would have to remediate the site.
since you can hear, but I'm also going to type it in.
Okay. Are there any questions or comments from the public? Can I get a motion then?
Were there any follow-up comments from our peer reviewer?
No, the report was the last violation. Correct, that was April 14th, correct? Was the last one?
That's correct.
All right, so, Tom, you want to make any comments about,
no, I was thinking about this kind of thing, and address and maybe address in the future to talk about. I just want to make sure that the screening that's proposed.
It's all detailed on the site, as shown on the plan.
all right, so, shall we, close the hearing?
Close the hearing and issue a positive site plan approval. Looking at the most recent plan followed. We need to say this, if a future plan, we need to come to
We will also add that this will be committed to writing. Can I get a second? Clark Brewer,
But we were on.
Tom, no?
I just have a question. Before we fully close, could I check with council and say, how long do we have to issue a decision on the site plan? And we have 21 days or 60, 50 days?
We'll have a written one.
All right. I just want to make sure that we don't close and not have an issue, so. No, I'm going to be okay. All right, wonderful. I got myself tonight.
Paul Grady. Eric Meyer.
Thank you very much. The project is better with the input.
Thank you.
When you see
July,
Your, 2 weeks?
July 13th,
Good luck with your project.
Thank you very much.
July 13th.
Oh,
All right,
Tomorrow's birthday.
That's your birthday, I thought it was last night.
Last week.
Ice cream will do. They'll be very happy.
Thank you very much.
All right, so let's, work on our planning board, business. We have planning board reorganization.
We already did that. That's the one you were confused on.
Second on the agenda.
That's when you were,
Thank you.
no,
Really great.
sorry, I know it's a long way.
Well, you know, with Zoom, you can kind of say, down some application. Not that I ever.
I may have cut the screen here and there.
Yeah? Because we're gonna go back to remote most likely.
I'd like to continue our business.
Really?
And Jen, I would like you to assist us in conducting the planning board reorganization.
Okay.
And I'm sure you know how to do this, so we're just gonna sit here and let you do it.
Oh, okay. So Robert's rule said that, anyone who wants to, nominate a position can do so. And generally you wait for a second. You don't have to do a second, it's just you can. So let me think of it. So you nominate, we start with chair, we go to vice chair, or we go to clerk. And then, so everybody should just wait and make your nominations and see how many people want to be chair, and then what we did last time, and then you can do what you did and, speak to us why you want to be chair.
Last time we just had, we get nominated.
We was nominated first, right?
Yeah, it was just nominated, but everybody spoke.
Right,
Yeah, and you don't have to do a
But
second.
it's not like when we vote where you make a motion.
Yeah,
I think the policies
Who
are
was
not.
nominated?
yeah, so I think you did it, so all you have to do is,
Okay.
So-
We make a nomination.
yes, yes, yes.
I nominate Amy Glassmeyer to serve as chair.
Well, I'm just doing it.
One question I had was, can anybody vote for anybody? I mean, could you vote for yourself? Could you vote for, another nominee, even if you've been nominated?
So the point is to be more than, so oftentimes when you do when reorganization, for example, like zoning, they nominate Woody and nobody else wants to do it, and then they just vote it. So here, if there's other people, then that's why you don't have to worry about the second, say, well, I nominate myself for chair, and then you can take a vote, and you would take a vote. We would have gotten to the vote if we hadn't gone to the issue.
Okay, so I'm gonna jump in because, I'm gonna, and this is I'm gonna be very transparent, which I hope to stay all the way through this. I know Clark is interested in being chair, and I've supported Clark in the past. I am gonna nominate Clark, and I'm gonna give you a reason for it now. Last year, when you became chairwoman, I was definitely 100% your seat. I'm not saying, I don't think there's been any change in my thought process for why I voted for you. But my rationale is this, and I will stick to this, even, about 50-50 whether I run for planning board for the next 5 years or not. If someday I become chair, or have the opportunity to become chair, I think it's very important in seeing the chair position that if there's more than one person that wants to be chair, the way I'm going to vote, whether I'm in the chair seat, or whether Clark's in the chair seat, you're in the chair seat, or anybody else, is that after that year, if there's more than one person, I'm gonna vote for turnover. Because I do think that the turnover is important. The reason why I say that is, the reason why we kind of voted you in is because I think there was time for Clark to take a back seat and to sit in the back. And because he had been chairperson for so long. And I do think that the turnover has been good for the board this year. I think that we brought a lot to the table in the turnover of it all. My concern is this, is that if you go for 2 years, not you, proverbial you go for 2 years, why not then 3 years? You go for 3 years, well, why not then 4 years? You go to 4 years, why not be a lifetime chairperson? Like Woody. What I'm saying is this, for me personally, to be consistent with myself and with my voting process, and to not let bias get in the way. When there's more than one person that's going to run for chair, I'm gonna vote for a new person to be the chair. Whether it's any of you, or whether it's myself, that's just the way I'm going to vote, because I think that does facilitate that turnover, and it's also a reason why I also look at it, why did we vote this new chairperson, and why do we vote reorganize every year? That's my only reason for it. That's why I'm doing it. If there was no other person that wanted to run for chair, I would be very excited to have you run through the chair seat again. But that is my real rationale, is because I think the turnover and the change does help. And I think the one-year term does lend some consistency to it. It's not that, that's my sole rationale and thought process, and I've actually given it a time.
But the same logic, no disrespect, but the same logic doesn't mean that you're going to something before for 7 or 8 years.
That's 100% correct, Tom.
So, I mean,
And if you hadn't stepped back from it, you would have created a little bit of a problem for me, because then who do I run
I'm
to?
not necessarily saying that. I've made it clear to all of you that apparently I don't have free vote. But, you know, I am the deciding vote, and I'm gonna make that decision. It wasn't just the longevity. This is why we want to discuss this in public. It wasn't just the longevity issue that continued to change that. So I don't wanna get into that.
You're correct.
So
But longevity can longevity, and I'm not,
Amy wants to do this.
right,
She's had the disadvantage of having to do with filling the.
entirely so, I
Zoom
agree.
thing. I've made my comments about the meeting link. We work together on making sure meetings run better. We're gonna continue to work together on that. You know, nobody's work. I go to meetings and kids, people go to meetings in this town, I know how to do it, so. I get what you're saying, that it doesn't justify the vote, that's what
That's fair.
so I.
My goal is to have a robust discussion about what the chairman, position
All of this,
ideally needs,
something
and
like that, I didn't assume that we were gonna have any confidence in taking back from all, but that's, besides the point,
and the thing, you know, I think I was chair for like 4, maybe 5 years, but not 7 or 8.
and not all, because of the individual enrichment,
No,
because
it's not.
lots of people in the board don't wanna do it, and that's the problem.
And that's what
happened
here.
And that's why I said that that's why I made it very clear, because there were many years at the beginning of my tenure that Clark was the only person willing to take the position.
I know.
And when you have 3 people that takes their willing to take the position, it does change the whole dynamic of how you work things, especially on a 5-person board. So in many years, Clark was put in a position of, me saying, no, I can't do it, I can barely make it to the meetings, or 3 other people. So I do agree with, you know, there are many reasons why a person gets voted to chair, but in some instances, some years it's gonna be 2, 3 people, some years it's gonna be 1.
I know, but the problem with long term chairman, again, nobody else wants to do it, and I'm trying to believe that everybody ought to step up.
Well, sharing the burden, I think is.
I agree.
Conservation, I was on for 9 years, it's so close, but we had 7 members, and we did rotate quite a bit, and I was on the select board, we rotated with every year. I've got served once in 6 years, but, you know, there were 4 other members, and they all stepped up and sat in the chair at one point or another. So I think everybody needs to do that, and it's the same, I think.
Well, I'd like to know what criticisms you have of how
I don't want
how I
to,
did.
no, I don't really want to discuss that, but we discussed that last year. So I don't think that's necessary.
I think you just didn't want me, chair again, and I was okay with him taking over.
All right.
This is different this time, I will say that. And then how it, throughout those years, several years. Of
course.
One of the reasons I got on the planning board, I was going to be quite honest with you.
Anyone who does it is gonna do it different. And everybody's gonna have different pros and cons, like, there's 3 of us who've offered.
I think it's admirable, as I said, you're one of the reasons I got on the planning.
So you're saying, you got on the planning board because you thought there was a problem with,
Yeah.
with the
That's
leadership
like
of
a
the board?
yeah, I mean, you don't need.
I'm just reading between the lines.
No, you're not reading. I thought, okay, we shut down meetings, people, the spectators coming in, or participants, you know, I found, I think you're a hell of a chair, I think you're very smart individual, at least put that aside. And I think you would be, you can be a good chair. But I think you got a little comfortable with this, when I got, it is, it helps the first, not what people in the audience, that's the same thing.
Yeah, that's fair.
And so, and that's not a jab, it's just that I think.
I remember
That
what,
happened just by being in the position for a long
that's
time.
right, that's right, it's together a board. You have the central lightning rod for anyone paying. I mean, at those, Smith Place hearings, there were over 50 people that were
might have some people beg to differ on that, all right, but that's, again, that's still good. So,
Well, I mean,
I
as
think we have,
chairman, you have to control the meeting, you can't make everybody happy. But, I appreciate, focus on that.
but I think you were good, I think you have a tendency to be a very detailed, but I think that we, you're both detailed, and I give you both that.
I don't think Tom ever really saw me here.
I was in front of you as a citizen gadfly with articles in 2017.
Oh, yeah.
You was.
I have observed occasional meetings over the years, and it might, my biggest mistake is what I'm trying to do.
But my big thing is,
The whole group.
I'll go back to what I was gonna say, I think we were in a COVID environment. You know, the one meetings could get a little long, sometimes, but I think that coming out of it, it brings a new awareness to the board. We're back to things that I see as far as the town changing, I hope, that a new select board member, that's one by overwhelming margin, which means me, speaking that the town is looking for something. And it's not quote unquote what I was quoting with the old guy. So I think that we really should do something. Okay. You know, there was a learning curve. And, you know, the president of the United States gets a 100-day grace period. And,
But it was a difficult position that you put in this year. I mean, maybe you were faced with, you know, a once in a lifetime pandemic. Being a chairwoman of any board, you know, is a difficult endeavor of being a chair, and you rose to the challenge, you got to do all the meetings. So I definitely applaud you for that, because, and I don't disagree with you, Paul. I mean, it's, you know, at the end of the day, I have a close friend in town that's the chairperson of another board, and, you know, he's going for another, you know, year, and we've had internal conversations about just our thought process of it all. And just in my experience, the only reason why I do think he's very deserving a second go out because of the pandemic. The only reason why I bring up Clark and changing things over is because it is another person that's raising their hand to do the job, and I think it's important.
Did you get nominated? Again, I did last time.
I think I nominated you. So I'll nominate you.
I don't want to go into that. As long as it's subject to, I know that we should just continue to. We don't know they're gonna stop. Finding ways to make it better. It's not helpful if it's up to the work that we do. Since I'm not this year, I'm not really.
We just had a discussion.
I understand it, but it naturally leads to criticisms of the way people have conducted themselves in the past, how they run meetings. It's just, I don't think this is necessary. You can do the head count here with the, I mean, you know, what's, you want to do it
I
better.
just think you should have another year. Stay a year, and then you roll it over. I
don't create that,
don't be a Clark, and I give you a credit for stepping up. I wish I had time.
I don't see anything as bad like
that's my perception. But, I don't want anybody to be offended, you know, I try not to, it's surprising as this may sound, I try not to offend.
All right,
I think I agree with you.
Yeah, I think so.
This is our first in person. It's really good to see you guys all first.
It is
I
good.
mean, it is, but
It is.
can we move to a vote? And,
Well, you know, I mean, you know, that if Glassmeyer getting another, year is a two, then you should you nominated her, so then someone would make a motion and have her be, chair again, or use the entire, officer system as is, and then someone would second that, and then we take a vote, and if it's already kind of decided, then do Glassmeyer first, then we don't have to do Tom or me. Go ahead.
Yeah, go ahead. Make a motion that we current organizational structure.
Okay, then.
Jim, do you want to call the vote?
Can we get a roll call vote, please? If I recall.
Say, I'm not correct.
Well, if they're gonna be sitting in the room, that's fine too, but, you know, Zoom unfortunately leads you to be held over the net.
So,
I do have one set of minutes I sent way back when, from March, March 10th.
okay, before we do that, we do have, additional administrative materials, plus and specifics related to our recent election is, discussions of committee liaison appointments. Tom, are you still considering?
Yeah, well, yeah, so, right now, this is a board I sit on, CPC, which is seasonal, open space once a month. The only working with doing a business study, so that's not a problem. It's only working with, although I got lost my clue yesterday because it was a hearing I'm getting into, so it's committing a 2.5 hour chunk of my business day every time you meet it on TV. Master plan implementation, but I'm on the master plan implementation meeting, and the zoning working group, as the representative of the open space committee, which I originally was a citizen of, and now I'm the planning board representative, so I was willing to give up open space too, but I really can't, because I'm passionate to stay on the zoning working group. If I can figure out if they can give another way to stay on that, I'll do that, because the planning board representative, the zoning working group is not here. So, I don't know what we want to do, but CPC, fine, you know, but it's seasonal, not a lot of heavy lifting.
The lady's not here, so we can renominate him for affordable housing. I'm on the Elm Street committee.
Right.
I'm willing to stay.
Yeah,
I am on the plan implementation committee as the liaison of the plan.
Is there any open?
The key one that's, no, those are it.
No,
Those are it.
true, but
But the key one that I want to be on is one of those two. But I am the open space committee representative, not the planning board representative. So that means I have to stay on the open space committee, but I'd be willing to give that up if I could otherwise be on the zoning board. And that means my liaison assignment to CPC and the open space committee possibly. I get rotating chairmanships, and I understand people have working management is just, and I don't believe that everybody needs to have at least one liaison.
I agree with you.
I think I'm for very willingly because I also have the time to take that.
Yeah.
But, all right, so CPC is truly.
Town meeting time, right.
Circular town meeting.
I'll take TV.
They're talking.
All right, we got that.
Yeah, open space is next month, but right now I've got to stay with open space until we figure out what's going on. I don't think it's fair to Paul Cleary to remove him as a representative of the zoning working group.
Why not? If you want.
Well, we're not here, I'm here to talk.
Yeah, just say we're.
Because he is not participating in it. The news that he's gonna be down all summer, he's news to me today. But he better get made. I'd rather not take away something that's not.
Wait a second. No, I'm not knocking off Larry. How often is the zoning board meet?
Zoning working group is working almost every 2 weeks.
So if he's going to put that first, you got a bit of an issue there.
He comes from me.
Yeah.
He's not represented.
It'll be Zoom.
Well, and I mean, if I could do it that way, I've been at open space now for what, 3 years?
So on the,
How about you, Eric?
So,
I
I
think
think
you
that-
should take open
I
space.
could take open space because I think my wife is getting beaten down by the meetings that have been happening so frequently lately, that if the meetings lighten up a little bit on planning board, I may have psychologically, the planning board may have overtaken her on Wednesdays where I can kind of, I'm bizarre. Love you.
I love you, Jerry.
I love you.
But no, we
Okay,
may be able to
so I
follow
don't
a
think
little more
we can
time.
solve this, so you volunteered to do
Sure.
open space.
Yeah.
What has to happen is a
And when
negotiation
Tom-
that takes place with the zoning
But yes, when Tom
bylaw.
figures everything out, he can let me know.
So on the, I recall that on the slides that that Katie lists that there are 2 planning board representatives, you and Paul. That's what I thought, and so I think what we could do if we need to, we could go back to the select board and have them modify it. If it's a charge and a membership, we could do that so that you could open space, you're at a CPC, and then you can stay on. I love the zoning
Yeah,
working
yeah.
group.
And the zoning, the zoning working group also has.
Right, and he's open space.
so.
He's open space.
All right, well, then it's a.
I think you're all set, but I'll double check, but I love it too, I love those meetings.
So that's fabulous, so we might have
So
solved that.
it's all resolved.
It's all resolved.
Eric, so you know, open space, community space, Tuesday night, every time.
Okay.
So that'd be cool.
The open space plan
Might
is
be
done.
something different.
The open space plan is
We sort of
done.
talked about that stuff.
We don't need to make a motion or anything, we all
Okay, no, we
agree,
don't.
everyone's
This is
gonna
an
sign.
internal decision.
Okay.
All right,
So-
this is great. So, then we have, I'm gonna postpone having, liaison updates because we just took a bunch of time and, you know, we wanna sort of space things out because we're gonna be
Yeah, I
together.
just borrowed Jimmy to get my phone so I
Yeah,
can
I
get
did.
email on it.
Okay.
Yeah.
So, but there is a couple of things that I think, we wanna talk about, and I wanna at least keep you apprised of. So, sometime more than 9 months ago, Woody and I got together and talked about the fact that the boards needed to be talking to one another, land use boards need to be talking together. We established a committee that is now meets once every 3 weeks, and what we do is we inform one another of the applications which are before our individual boards and how they're moving through the process. And what that allows us to do is to get a better sense for ebb and flow and to begin to shape how applications come to the town overall so that the most effective means of processing occurs. And so we've met 4 times and we have now got a running tally of the various different things that are happening in front of the boards. And it's very interesting to see exactly what's coming our way and where they go in and where they go out. And I will be making an update on that as it occurs. The other thing to say is that we have established a process, literally a formal process by which applications will come into town and they will be reviewed by the building inspector and they will have a formal process of an assessment as to where they should go. Previously, they could come in from the clerk, they could come in a lot of different boards, and what that does is it short circuits an intelligence development that allows us to make better decisions. And so I will also bring that kind of information to the board on a regular basis when you know something either something emerges or there's something that I need your opinion about, right? So I'm not gonna keep you out of this, I'm gonna keep you in it. And so but it won't be super regular because I just don't know yet. I can't remember. Okay.
Related topics, so if you listen to the select board, the process of selection of new town council has been done somehow, I don't know where exactly they are at the point, but, comments that we put in for our board and the other land boards generally was listened to, I think a lot of the questions that, comments about our needs, are going to be addressed to the 3 applicants. So we'll just have to wait and see. I don't know if they've made decisions on who the interview team is, because we did ask that somebody from land report because the interview team, but I'm gonna wait on that. The other thing about town hall, and this is something we discussed back in the fall, we made on the 5th, and then I spoke to Chris recently about it around meeting time. There seems to be, there's a concern to me that there's not a clear understanding of lines of authority between the board, their staff, their council, and management here in town hall. Chris hires us staff, we hire us staff. I understand that one of our other land use boards has a really horrible communication situation right now between their staff and the board. And I have suggested that once we get it back to getting into in-person meetings, that we have a meeting, that we don't have to close, so that every member of every one of these boards, because we all have these concerns, to at least have everybody understand and air out what are the lines of authority between the staff will collect and the board,
We don't,
No.
we don't, we do not
Not at
report
all,
to,
but then, you know,
I can tell you what
I
the.
know that, I understand that, but I don't know that everybody understands that, and then when we, you know, what happens if we direct some of the staff to do something they're not doing? I think we have to just clear the air, I mean, you know, a lot of this arose out of some people's resentment the way town council has been imposed on us, and engineers have been imposed on us, you know, town hall is reorganized the land use administration more like some of the bigger towns, where there's a planning department, I mean, we have the same set of experts that are used for the different land use things, that's not the way it is before. It reminds me when the town manager came in, there was unbelievable hostility and resistance from some boards to the idea that you're now having to answer to somebody in this office.
Right.
So, I just think that we have more staff, we've had some transition in staff, there's some tensions, and I just thought it was productive, and I brought it up to Chris, that we also found when we can, and just air it out so everybody's clear.
I think, I
And I
agree.
think the volunteers and the boards don't fully appreciate what lines of authority, they assume they're agent and their staff works for them. So obviously it's a cooperative relationship, obviously we can direct things to be done.
And Chris would be at the meeting.
Yeah.
That would be important.
It's a
Yeah.
meeting that,
I think
where
that would be good.
veterans goes to Chris as a recommendation from
I
us,
Yes.
and this needs to happen to make things go
Feel that
better.
record would be there too.
Yeah, that's what it's thinking.
Yeah. But it's a big mass meeting of multiple boards, posting, the logistics may not work, but, you know, the alternative is right that the town council does, if anybody has any concerns, issues,
That's a great idea.
amongst us, you know, our relationship with staff, our relationship with council, our relationship with town manager, we should make those known. Let's just clear the air about it and make sure everybody's on the same page, so that everything runs smoothly.
I think it's a great idea. One of the big problems that we identified in the master plan is the silo, like that. So having some, meeting focused on, council and roles and responsibility of all the land use boards. I think that's,
Well,
a
actually,
step in the
public
direction
protest
of.
also, I mean, it
avoiding
really basically
silence.
is the structure of town, has to be re-verified, right? What are the lines of authority? People are.
See how it can be Greg, it could get
Well,
Greg.
and it's causing people a lot of stress.
Yeah,
I mean,
you
there's
can see how that would happen quickly.
mechanisms
Sure.
and
We have most of the boards with not the, you know, finite areas of jurisdiction, but they're created by state law, not by town bylaw. You know, town has its treaty of the state law, we have ours in the state law, but yet, you know, we answer to other people as well. I just thought it was another good idea, something we should talk about. The streamlining of procedures. I think that's coming with, you know, with Chris's idea of having like a planning department or a building department, as some of the larger towns do, where all applications go through the one door, and then they get dispersed to their respective committees. The most important thing is that when an application comes in, even if it might not be in our jurisdiction, let us know, Concom has something, so we're not blindsided.
so that's what we
When
have
it
to
comes
know.
to us, so zoning is not blindsided by something we're doing. So
That,
those things are in the works.
particular part of the process is actually.
Yeah, I don't wanna ever get to the point where, when I'm hearing, another board is at right now. People are resigning and it's hard. Yeah. It's hard, people are resigning.
And although the reason for the resignation is more complicated and personal.
Correct.
It is not,
I get that.
it is like that.
I get that.
So it's a personnel issue, so it's not just because somebody didn't like it.
And a lot of that is just more there, just the staff of that board, stating that it doesn't really report to that board. I mean, it's a
I think we're getting into an area that we should not be concerned.
No, I
I feel very uncomfortable as a person, member of the staff. Ian Haley Dippold is actually listening to this meeting, so you can come and we can all have, I think it's a great idea. I love the whole idea.
I think we should leave it on the table, it'd be nice to meet with
I think it's a great
all the
idea.
boards get together, I don't think we have to gel this first out.
Because it's really, that's really not us.
So we do have a couple of other things. One is, minutes.
March 10th, I sent them out, well,
Okay, and then the other thing is, are there any items not anticipated for 48 hours? That somebody.
yes, I have to just, but we'll make an appointment. And then also, I just wanted to, thank you for the approval of the minutes very much. That there was an email sent out earlier today from Christine here to everybody, and I don't know whether it's gone to personal, to Tom or email, just about the fact that as of tomorrow, we're going back virtual so just so that you know, we are working on having really cool technology that will allow us to keep a hybrid model. But it's on its way here, and we'll have other rooms, and it's going to be great because I think it's going to increase our involvement with the community like we've seen with Zoom. But this is obviously like, poor people have to take Dramamine, and I dropped the camera earlier and it fell down, and so fun made me nauseous. So I'm excited for it. I've met with IT about it, and so it's going to be cool. So I think our next meeting will be virtual until we can get we'll cut up and running because those cameras have to be reinstalled, and then we would also have this room and hopefully a third room like Tom had mentioned earlier.
I assume everybody on this board would prefer to go to the hybrid model so that we align, like with the side and left, so that we can.
And I'm just going by, Chris has asked everybody to go back virtual until we have the
No,
technology.
when we have it.
Oh, yes.
I'm assuming
Oh, I'm with
everybody
you.
on this board, because I believe we would have the option of staying all Zoom on next week. Assuming everybody on the board has to say.
It's hard to believe 2022.
Yeah.
I heard that.
I would-
I was like that long, and then I realized how close it was. I couldn't believe
Yeah,
it.
it's really-
So
I
my
read
son's
that.
graduating college in 2022, and my daughter, it's crazy. So are you around tomorrow? And local, when are you in town?
I'm out of town, but I'm in the morning.
All right, so we'll make an appointment next week.
All right.
Okay.
In anticipating next week, what is the situation? And there was some kind of grant, about something like that going that they're not pursuing, like the municipal plan, is that related to that?
Solar panels.
So that was different. That was going to be where they put out they could charge, keep the buses there, and it was a green hub for all the vehicles in town. And they felt that they didn't have enough funds that could actually go to that.
That one connection to it is super.
This is already approved for a subdivision way back when. So first it's an A&R to address lot lines, and then and then they did. We met with them informally, Lauren and I and John, a long time ago, like 3 months ago, to hear what they were talking about, and more looking at when people return to life after the pandemic, and they're used to not having to commute, but they still want to have. It's great working at home, but they'd like their own space. They're basically office suites, but they're kind of built into the ledge, and co-working, so you could go, you could rent it.
Where's
But
this?
up on Situate Hill, you'll see that
It's right across the storage, right on the
the
storage
storage
area.
unit. The drawings, all the information has been put up on the website, on our planning page. You can take a look at those. It's a lot. I mean, they're huge files, so we put them up there. I put them up there yesterday.
Wait, what street, please?
No, they're not luxury, but we actually
There are
do.
70 of them, and there are
70?
19 buildings specified. So it's a big
It's a
project.
big project.
It's
building?
19, yeah, because it's to be modular, right? Because honestly, from the standpoint of the development community and real estate folks and people like JLL, there's no clarity in the industry as to what's going to happen. So they're basically designing something which can be this.
They're sitting right behind their desk.
Because they have the property.
Right.
So taxpayers would, for the town, it's great to see a large scale commercial development, but that's such excellent to the town. That's the scale of it.
They've also done a pretty thorough needs assessment as well. When we discussed this, I said, well, what about workstation? And we've already got this and this, and they really feel there's a need for it. Based on,
Does Max still that?
But when we did the harbor project,
It's already been approved as a, it was already approved as a subdivision.
Remember, we wrote
So they're gonna
into
they're gonna be coming for an A and R to fix some lot lines, and then this is in that same space, but this is what they're put. The other proposal was 3 large, like, or 4 large, warehouse style buildings. So this, when we met with them, I also said, you know, make it have a lot of green space. I told them how you love that view around there.
Workstation can be fun.
So the other issue is that, this
I'll
was
take a market
said today,
Fine.
is that, there will be traffic problems because of the fact that it's right across from King Street.
Yeah, it will.
But the property owners are aware of that, and they have already stated that they would be open to negotiating to try to mitigate whatever the traffic is.
The signal,
But there's already a butter suit coming
the
out.
signal's already
I know,
talked about in
yeah.
previous hearing.
Yeah, for a long time, we wanted to say no.
The state,
Okay, you know, I come across where,
Woody talked about this.
you know where the intersection is?
Signal there.
That they're not going to put another light
It's
there.
a real light that, for years they talked about a light, I don't know.
I don't think that's, I don't think that's the case.
I don't think we're even there yet.
I believe we sent it to us in the.
I don't think the state,
Yes?
The buffer
I don't think the state is,
No, it's in between.
the threshold
Okay,
traffic
stop and stop light.
is what triggers signalization.
Right, well, Woody
And then you
said
have to on the
that,
left, right?
that is exactly
Maybe
right.
take a right
And
out there.
even this project.
Take a right
will
on
not
Sawyer,
take
no, on
off.
Yeah,
Sawyer.
yeah.
Get down 3A.
And
So
it'll
I
be
don't know
on
if
your
he's right
left,
or wrong. I'm
you'll
not
see that there's a
telling you
paved road, but it's not been built. It's,
Oh, the old house they tore
Well,
down.
I
don't think so. I think it's up there. No, that's further down, further down the hill.
It's my understanding that they're right at the edge, you know, if they use the, except for the medical building, to that
Stop and shop lights,
intersection.
Yeah, maybe I almost get cross-eyed every time I'm trying to take a left. They've been talking about a light since they did Avalon, but they never had the traffic count.
The only big storage building that we got,
I mean,
right across from the King Street Dogway,
All right, so we
down the
should,
hill from.
so, can I get a motion